the best hat game in the country. Tom Hart, SEC Network, ESPN. What's up, buddy?
What's shaking? Yeah, and I guess if you score a touchdown on each of your first 5 possessions, that'll put you in a good mood right off the bat, week 1, huh?
Well, Tom, two things can be true, right? Like, yeah, I know it's just New Mexico, but the dress rehearsal looked pretty darn good, man.
You have to have a good dress rehearsal if you want to pull it off. I mean, you need a game like that to go into Miami. I didn't watch the whole thing, so I can't speak to every snap. But yeah, I mean, where would you rather be, and who would you rather be waking up this morning? A&M or Florida? You know, would you rather be in South Carolina? No, you can learn a lot from losses, but the bottom line is you want to put your best foot forward. And generally speaking, everybody in the SEC did.
Well, a lot of the things that people had questions about, and again, they're going to have to answer these questions throughout the year. Bobby Petrino and Jimbo dynamic, Connor as the quarterback, that wide receiver room. First glance, all of those things were exactly what people were reporting, at least internally, about A&M's offense.
And how about the running backs? And how about the freshman? He looked pretty good, didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's fantastic. You don't look back, don't be suckered into people who have you look back and say, "Oh, it's only New Mexico." You take care of business. You do what you have to do against lesser opponents, and it's the way you do it as well. I mean, I think the start that the offense got off to makes you happy. I mean, makes you realize like, hey, we're going in the right direction. We're moving in the proper ways, and we've got the right people on the field to do it. And listen, half the teams that went out and played college football this weekend lost. So better than that.
Tom, it sets up a big one against Miami, and Miami's kind of in a similar place as A&M. A&M's got more talent. They're the SEC team, but Miami's a team that their offense looks really good under their new offensive coordinator, Tyler Van Dyke. Another year. He struggled last year. It sets up a huge one. Your thoughts, at least on a Monday, heading into that game on Saturday?
Yeah, really early because I haven't done a deep dive on Miami yet. But we do know that A&M has lost something like 6 consecutive road games. So this is a different team. This is different personnel. We know it's a different coaching staff in terms of the makeup. So I hate to pin those losses on this team, but that is a monkey they have to get off their back, go on the road and win a game on the road. And that's vastly different. And you know that in the league, you're going to have to go win tough games on the road. So I think it's a great test for them in many ways. I don't know where Miami's going to be at the end of the season. I was actually just watching some of their stuff from last year because they lost at home to Middle Tennessee, and we had Middle's game at Alabama to start the season. So I agree with you. I don't think that talent level is anywhere close to what A&M is. So that's my one hesitation about calling Miami a great team. But the fact that, you got to go to their place makes it more difficult for sure.
Well, I think you said something there that kind of made me think about me. I'm watching this game on Saturday, and there's parts of me that keep thinking of, oh, well, here we go. But this is a new team. Like, everything about it felt new.
Yeah.
The faces were the same, but it's like buying the new Lexus, right? There was just something new about it that, like, it's not the same thing, guys. Like, it's, at least offensively, it's completely different.
I mean, listen, you're shooting for a new Lexus. I'll take a new Ford. Like, whatever. That's fine. Give me new. But there was a great philosopher who once said, no man steps in the same river twice, right? It always changes. Life always changes. Every day you wake up is different from yesterday. Even if it's the same people, there's something new about that. And there's an alteration that has occurred somewhere. And this is a program that needed to put last year in the rearview mirror. So, yeah, even if the names on the back of the jerseys were the same in some spots or many spots, it's about getting off to a great start and having positive reinforcement and a great attitude about the season. I felt like last year, especially come November, this program was just in the dumps and just couldn't climb out of it one way or another. No matter what happened or what the focus was, something went wrong. And sometimes seasons are snake bit and you just need to hit the reset button. So I agree with you. And I think that new car smell is something that pays off in many ways. I mean, just I hate talking about Colorado because they only have one win, and Deion Sanders is a look-at-me guy that always wants to be in the spotlight. But you can't argue with the freshness of a new start, and you can't argue with the reinvigoration of that once proud program that was great in the 90s, and we haven't heard from since and only knows irrelevance. They're relevant again because they have the right attitude and they have the right people, and they have a why not us kind of presentation to the season. And I think that's refreshing in many ways, even though it grinds on me a little bit that their accomplishments don't match up with what others have to this point, yet they get more attention.
Talking to Tom Hart here on TexAgs Radio. Tom, how much do you read into the ACC beating the SEC pretty much in, what was it, the 3 games? The Florida game, I don't think anybody was surprised. The way LSU went down yesterday was a bit surprising.
It was. They completely no-showed in the second half. Now, I've heard all offseason that Florida State is loaded with NFL studs and that they are as talented as they've been in a long time. And I think we saw that on the field last night in the second half. It was also a reminder that, last year was supposed to be a building year for Brian Kelly and LSU, and they won a lot of close games and they turned it into something special. But maybe they were a little bit ahead of schedule. I think it's only fair for those of us who look at it through an SEC lens that if the SEC would have won those games, we would have said, look, dominance continues over an inferior conference. It's only fair to look at it the other way. Those are wins that the ACC is going to find value in all season long, especially in college football, where it's less about the standings and more about perception, especially when it comes to rankings. And they can look back, and if North Carolina stumbles in week 6, they can say, hey, they had that big win in Charlotte to open the season. And if Florida State, loses to Clemson, they can go, well, they should still be in the playoff. They beat the snot out of LSU. So those are really valuable games, and credit to the ACC for pulling them off. The Florida situation didn't surprise me at all. I never counted that one as a win. Just too many question marks around the talent level in Florida, especially going on the road to a place like Utah, where, listen, they might be out of sight, out of mind, given their geographic location. But Kyle Whittingham has long collected and produced NFL players, and they had the better roster. Simple as that. I mean, you can point to a lot of different reasons Florida lost that game. Quarterback play wasn't great, being one of them. But the bottom line is Utah has a better roster than Florida, and I think that's a concern. It's got to be a concern for Gators fans once they get into conference play, because if that's the case, there's a good chance that other teams in the league, more often than not, have a better roster than Florida.
Tom, if I can give A&M props for how their offense looked against New Mexico, I got to give Alabama and Jalen Milroe some props too, because his first audition this year, at least, looked pretty phenomenal.
He was sensational, and we had a long conversation with Tommy Rees on Friday afternoon, and Nick Saban, of course. And the question was, and I think this is something for fans to keep in mind. Everyone will be judging the quarterback situation based on what they see during game day, but what percentage of their grade comes from behind closed doors, meaning what is happening in practice throughout all of the fall or during a given week? How do they handle themselves in the film room? How do they handle themselves in the locker room? And Tommy Rees kind of shrugged his shoulders. He said, that's still a significant part of the equation, and while we want to judge them based on what they do on game day, the bottom line is a lot goes into it. And so Jalen Milroe won that job, and he looks like he's got a firm grasp on it. The bigger surprise to many who have been following this closely at Alabama is that Ty Simpson appears to be the third-string quarterback, not second string. So the Buckner, the Notre Dame transfer, was the second one into the game and is their backup. But Milroe, when I watched him in practice, was a little inconsistent, off target, and that has been a key for them and for him and his growth. But he barely missed on Saturday night. And once the lights went on and there was a different color jersey across from him, he looked really, really good. And he was very efficient and extremely dangerous with his legs. And there's a good chance that he's their most dynamic playmaker. So it'd be really hard to go to a different quarterback at any point in the season, because they're a team that's going to need plays from the quarterback position to put up a lot of points.
Talking to Tom Hart here on TexAgs Radio. So can we read into Texas, though, not looking as sharp as they probably wanted to against Rice, and how that sets up this big match with Alabama?
How about JT Daniels? Like, my man is still just kicking around. Like, that dude's playing at Rice now. He's been at like 17 different schools. It's amazing. Good for him. Um, yeah, I think a tune-up is a tune-up, and you can look at it different ways. Quinn Ewers seems to have made a step in his maturity over the offseason. I don't know if that shows itself during the course of a game at Tuscaloosa where everybody and their brother's going to be there, and it's certainly going to line up like the game of the year, especially early on. But that game is just simply going to come down to who makes plays. Here's one thing to watch going forward, and this struck me with Alabama, but I think it's a college football storyline to watch. College football offenses over the last 6 years have gone backwards. Points per game, yards per game, they've all gone down. In fact, last year's numbers were the lowest they've been since 2011. Couple that with the fact that you're going to get, depending on who's playing, 7, 10, maybe 20 fewer snaps a game, and offensive production is going to go down even further. It stands to reason with the new clock rules. So how many points does it take to win a college football game going forward, right? In the playoffs, historically, I mean, you have to score 45, 50. Georgia put 60-something on the board last year in the national championship game. You have to score a lot of points to win a national championship and to make it through the playoffs. But maybe that's come back down to earth. And maybe the style of play that I think we're going to see from Nick Saban this year, which was more ground and pound than they've been, and maybe since before Kiffin got there in 2014, maybe we're seeing a return to bully ball for teams that can do it in college football, and you'll see distinctly different styles. So when you watch Texas and Alabama Saturday night, keep in mind that the possessions are going to be limited, and that means ball control takes on even more importance. You have to value every possession, and I'm really curious to see. We have really small sample size right now, but I'm very curious to see how that plays out throughout the season with the new clock rules.
That North Carolina South Carolina game, look, South Carolina did not look prepared, ready for it. They made a lot of mistakes. But now what's ahead with Georgia and Tennessee over the next month, I wonder how that could derail, because they're not far off, at least in that game. Yet with those two still ahead in this month of September, that could really derail all of their season aspirations.
Talent. It's a matter of talent. And they're arguably their best offensive player is now playing for Florida State at tight end and playing some running back and some wide out. And their running backs are small and don't carry much weight. And I like Spencer Rattler. I thought he made great strides last year, and I thought getting a new offensive coordinator in there is going to simplify some things and make him more comfortable, give them a chance. But I just don't see that they have the type of talent to hang in there every weekend. Certainly not against Georgia. I thought the Georgia quarterbacks both looked good. They didn't look excellent. But they have the best, you include tight ends. Georgia's got the best receiver room in the country, especially with Brock Bowers. They can use him in so many different ways. And so just the talent disparity that will be on the field between Georgia and South Carolina is going to be huge. That doesn't mean, by the way, that South Carolina can't collect more wins against the non-Georgias of the world in the league. And I think that will be fascinating races to follow. We always focus on the top, but to me, the middle is where these coaches really make their money, right? It's winning the games against middle of the pack teams or lower division teams when you got to keep your guys focused over the course of a long season and collect those wins that then help you on signing day, that then help you keep talent around and keep people happy and raise the NIL funds and get to a place where you're not losing your best offensive player to Florida State as South Carolina did.
Hey, let's end with Big 12 talk. You mentioned Prime in Colorado, but that game against TCU was must-watch television. You had Baylor losing. It was not a great weekend there for some of the Big 12 top teams.
I was shocked Dave Aranda's defense looked like it did in the second half. Credit G.J. Kinney. I mean, that's a big win for those guys. But I've always been a Dave Aranda fan, and I thought, and he is – shown it at times that Baylor was building something special. So I was really surprised that they looked as they did late in the game. That was a big surprise to me. By the way, our boy Gus Johnson already has Colorado in the Big 12. So throughout the game, that was his talking point. And to my knowledge, they still have a chance to win the Pac-12, which is fascinating. But I think that the Big 12's going to be a good league, and they're going to have a lot of great momentum going into next season when all of this gets restructured. The one team, by the way, that's moving that I think needs all eyes on them is Washington. Once again, one of my preseason teams to make it in the college football playoff. Michael Penix Jr. is sensational.
Yeah, he is.
Their offense didn't look like it skipped a beat. They got a nice win. So those Pac-12 teams that are on their way out the door have a chance to make some noise before they leave.
Tom, we appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, David. Hey, happy Labor Day, buddy, and congrats on the new Lexus, apparently.
Well, it's 2013, but it is what it is.
New enough.
Later, buddy.